The old car sat beneath layers of dust and rust at the edge of a forgotten storage yard, hidden behind broken fences and overgrown weeds. Most people walked past it without a second glance. To them, it was nothing more than scrap metal waiting for the junkyard. But what nobody knew was that inside that silent, abandoned vehicle lived the last surviving piece of someone's shattered life. And the man who would discover its story had already lost more than most people could imagine. Before we begin, if you believe kindness still matters, if you believe people deserve second chances, take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us that even small acts of compassion can change a life forever. Every morning before sunrise, Daniel Harris woke up in the small house he shared with his 8-year-old daughter, Emma. Life had not been kind to him. 3 years earlier, he had lost his wife to a sudden illness that left him emotionally broken and financially struggling. Since then, every day felt like a battle. He worked long hours repairing cars in a modest garage on the edge of town while trying to be both father and mother to his little girl. Money was always tight. Some months he barely managed to pay the bills. Yet despite everything, Daniel never allowed bitterness to settle in his heart. He carried his grief quietly and focused on moving forward, one day at a time. One rainy afternoon, after finishing a repair job, Daniel visited a local vehicle auction yard hoping to find cheap parts for a customer's truck. While wandering through rows of abandoned vehicles, his eyes landed on an old blue sedan buried beneath years of neglect. Something about it felt different. The windshield was cracked. The paint had faded almost completely. Leaves filled the interior. The tires had sunk into the dirt. Yet Daniel noticed signs that suggested the car had once been deeply loved. The steering wheel cover was carefully stitched. The seats, though damaged, showed traces of meticulous care. A small silver charm still hung from the rearview mirror. Curious, he asked the yard manager about it. The manager shrugged and explained that the vehicle had been sitting there for nearly 8 years. Nobody had claimed it. Nobody had bid on it. Nobody wanted it. For a price barely higher than scrap value, Daniel bought the car. Even he wasn't entirely sure why. When he brought it home, Emma laughed at the sight of it. The car looked hopeless. But Daniel saw something others didn't. Over the next several weeks, he worked on the vehicle after long days at the garage. Every evening, while Emma did homework nearby, he carefully cleaned rust, replaced worn parts, repaired the engine, and restored damaged components. Progress was painfully slow. Sometimes exhaustion nearly defeated him. Sometimes unexpected repair costs forced him to pause for days. But each time he considered giving up, something pulled him back to the project. As he worked, he discovered small clues hidden throughout the car. An old parking permit. A faded family photograph tucked inside the glove compartment. A handwritten grocery list. Children's stickers attached to the back windows. These weren't just forgotten objects. They were fragments of someone's life. One evening, while removing the interior panels, Daniel discovered a small envelope trapped behind the dashboard. Inside were photographs and several documents that had somehow escaped years of neglect. Among them was a picture of a smiling woman standing beside the car on what appeared to be the day she purchased it. Written on the back was a name. Margaret Lawson. Daniel stared at the photograph for a long time. The woman's smile seemed genuine and full of hope. He couldn't explain why, but he felt compelled to learn what had happened to her. Over the next few days, he began searching public records and old community articles online. What he discovered left him speechless. Years earlier, Margaret Lawson had been a respected teacher in the town. She had spent decades helping children learn and grow. Former students described her as patient, kind, and endlessly generous. Then tragedy struck. A devastating house fire destroyed her home. The fire claimed nearly everything she owned. Insurance complications delayed assistance. Medical expenses from injuries she suffered during the disaster consumed her savings. Within a short period, she lost her house, her belongings, and eventually her financial stability. The car had been one of the last possessions she owned. Unable to afford repairs after an accident damaged the vehicle, she eventually lost it during a legal and financial nightmare that followed her hardships. As Daniel continued researching, he learned something even more heartbreaking. Margaret was still alive. She now lived in a modest assisted housing facility several towns away. The realization hit him hard. For years, this car had sat forgotten while its owner struggled through unimaginable loss. That night, Daniel couldn't stop thinking about her. He looked at the nearly restored sedan sitting in his garage and made a decision that surprised even himself. He wasn't going to sell it. He was going to return it. The following months became a labor of love unlike anything he had ever undertaken. Every spare dollar went into the project. Some nights he worked until midnight. His hands became covered in cuts and grease. There were moments when the engine refused to cooperate and moments when unexpected repairs threatened to derail everything. Yet the vision of Margaret's smile in that old photograph kept him moving forward. Emma became his biggest supporter. Together, father and daughter cleaned every surface. They polished chrome pieces until they reflected sunlight. They repaired the upholstery. They restored the dashboard. Slowly, the forgotten vehicle came back to life. Neighbors began noticing the transformation. Friends donated spare parts. Former customers offered assistance. Without realizing it, Daniel's mission began inspiring others. People who had never met Margaret contributed in small ways. One person supplied paint. Another helped repair electrical wiring. Someone else donated replacement tires. What started as one man's project became a community effort. Months later, the transformation was complete. The faded wreck that once seemed destined for the scrapyard now looked almost identical to the vehicle shown in Margaret's old photograph. Standing beside it, Daniel felt emotional. Not because of the work. Because of what the car represented. Hope. Memory. Dignity. A reminder that some things are worth saving. Daniel contacted the housing facility and carefully arranged a visit without revealing his surprise. Margaret, now in her 70s, agreed to meet him. The day finally arrived. The restored blue sedan sat outside the facility beneath bright morning sunlight. A small crowd gathered nearby. Many were residents curious about the event. Others were volunteers who had helped during the restoration. Daniel felt nervous. More nervous than he had felt in years. When Margaret emerged from the building, she walked slowly with the assistance of a cane. Life had clearly left its marks. Yet there was kindness in her eyes. Daniel greeted her warmly and gently guided her toward the parking area. At first she seemed confused. Then she saw the car. Everything stopped. Her footsteps froze. Her eyes widened. For several seconds she simply stared. The world around her seemed to disappear. Tears immediately filled her eyes. Her hand rose to her mouth as she struggled to comprehend what she was seeing. The blue sedan stood before her exactly as she remembered it. Not abandoned. Not forgotten. Restored. Alive. Margaret slowly approached the vehicle. Her fingers touched the hood. She traced the chrome trim. She looked through the windows. The emotions she had buried for years suddenly surfaced. The car wasn't merely transportation. It represented a chapter of life before tragedy changed everything. It reminded her of family road trips, school mornings, grocery runs, celebrations, and ordinary moments that had become priceless memories. For years she believed that part of her life was gone forever. Now it stood before her once again. Tears streamed down her face. Around her, many others were crying too. Daniel quietly handed her the keys. Margaret looked at him in disbelief. The gesture seemed almost impossible to process. A stranger had spent months restoring a forgotten piece of her past and expected nothing in return. The crowd watched as she gently held the keys in trembling hands. The moment felt larger than any of them could explain. It wasn't about a car anymore. It was about humanity. About remembering people society often overlooks. About proving that compassion still exists. As news of the story spread through the community, people began sharing their own experiences of loss and kindness. Some volunteered at shelters. Others donated to families facing hardship. Several former students of Margaret reached out after hearing what happened. Many hadn't spoken to her in years. Now they returned with letters, photographs, and heartfelt messages describing how she had changed their lives. One act of kindness created a ripple effect no one expected. Months later, Margaret's life looked different. Not because she suddenly became wealthy. Not because all her problems disappeared. But because she no longer felt forgotten. She felt seen. Valued. Remembered. And Daniel discovered something unexpected too. While helping someone else reclaim a lost piece of their life, he had healed part of his own heart. The grief he carried after losing his wife never disappeared completely. But through this journey, he remembered something important. Even after devastating loss, life still offers opportunities to create light for others. And sometimes that light finds its way back to us. If this story has touched your heart so far, please take a moment to like the video, leave a comment, share it with your friends and family, and subscribe to support more inspiring stories that remind us of the good still present in the world. Special request: comment below with the words, "Kindness lives on," if you believe a single act of compassion can change someone's life forever. Years later, residents in town still remembered the story of the forgotten blue sedan. Not because it was an expensive car. Not because it was rare. But because it became a symbol of something far more valuable. It proved that while the world often moves too fast, there are still people willing to stop, notice someone's pain, and help carry their burden. A single father struggling to raise his daughter saw value where everyone else saw junk. A forgotten car became a bridge connecting the past to the present. A woman who had lost almost everything regained a piece of her identity. And countless people were reminded that kindness is never wasted. Because sometimes the greatest miracles aren't found in grand gestures or enormous fortunes. Sometimes they begin with one person choosing to care. And that choice can change a life forever.